Bueno, estamos aquí en Hablemos de Bitcoin. Estamos ya con Giacomo Zucco, con quien vamos a estar conversando el día de hoy. Antes de partir, saben que tenemos un breve mensaje de nuestros patrocinantes. Hoy vamos a estar conversando con Giacomo sobre el maximalismo, sobre el reciente debate un poco social justice warrior que se dio ahí con el lenguaje y el código de Bitcoin. Pero bueno, antes vamos a tener un mensaje de delante.io. En el video, el audio dice una tarifa que no es, pero igual allí leeremos el comentario justamente en ese momento, porque ya aumentaron nuevamente los porcentajes anuales que puedes tener sobre tus depósitos en la plataforma. Y bueno, un mensaje de Paxful, así que vamos a ello de una
Satoshi
vez.
en Venezuela es patrocinado por Leden, una suite de servicios que te ayudan a ahorrar y ganar más Bitcoin y dólares digitales. Nuestros productos te permiten ganar intereses, pedir créditos en dólares y obtener créditos para comprar más Bitcoin. Nuestras cuentas de ahorro en Bitcoin y dólares USDC, en colaboración con Genesis, ofrecen las mejores tasas de interés en el mercado, trabajando con la institución más establecida y con mayor transparencia de la industria. Puedes comenzar a ganar el 6,5% anual en tu Bitcoin y el 10% anual en tu USDC desde ya, y mantendremos estas tasas por el resto del año.
Es
Nuestro servicio de
11.7.
exclusivamente en Lend te permite utilizar el Bitcoin que ya tienes para obtener un crédito en dólares y comprar el mismo monto de Bitcoin, utilizando un crédito respaldado por Bitcoin para duplicar el monto de Bitcoin que posees. Y si necesitas dólares pero no quieres vender tus Bitcoin, puedes seguir siendo el dueño de tus Bitcoin y obtener un crédito en dólares en 24 horas. ¿Quieres ponerle alas a tus Satoshis? Aprende más en leden.io.
Ahora un mensaje de Paxful.
Hola, mi nombre es Isabel Quintero y hoy les voy a contar cómo envío dinero a mi familia usando Paxful. Como estoy en Colombia, voy a la página de Paxful y busco comprar Bitcoin con pesos colombianos. Generalmente uso transferencia bancaria, pero también puedo utilizar otras formas de pago como Nequi, PayPal y hasta tarjetas de regalo. Si tengo prisa en enviar el dinero, busco una oferta de compra de Bitcoin en Venezuela. De lo contrario, creo una oferta de venta de Bitcoin y espero por un comprador que esté interesado. Pido entonces al comprador que haga el pago en mi cuenta bancaria en Venezuela. Todo eso pasa en pocos minutos, con seguridad y rapidez. Ni hablar del costo, que es mucho más barato que otras formas de envío. En algunas situaciones hasta tengo ganancias. Así que ya, logro transferir dinero para quien, dónde y cuando quiera usando Paxful. Y sí, tú también puedes hacer lo mismo. ¡Feliz remesa!
Bueno, y para finalizar, recordarles que se suscriban al canal de Satoshi en Venezuela, que es donde ocurre la magia actualmente. Así que bueno, ya hemos terminado el momento publicitario, ya ahora sí nos podemos poner tóxicos. Ayer tuvimos un Satoshi debate bastante atípico en el que estuvimos hablando de DeFi. Yo ni siquiera me puse la gorra porque era el árbitro, pero hubo allí intercambio y discusiones interesantes entre propuestas disímiles, entre visiones disímiles. Hoy creo que estamos un poco más en confianza acá. Sí, sobre todo porque creo que es bastante claro que la postura de Satoshi en Venezuela siendo Bitcoin only es mucho más cercana a esta idea del maximalismo que iremos descubriendo hoy con Giacomo. Y bueno, muchas gracias a las personas que están conectados con nosotros. Vamos a estar conversando en inglés y yo voy a traducir las ideas principales de las respuestas de Giacomo porque Giacomo es italiano, yo soy venezolano y la lengua franca es entonces el inglés. Así que
I mean, I can speak a fake Spanish. I just speak Italian, putting some S at the end of the words, but then not proper Spanish. It's more like, Spanish cash, a clone of Spanish, which is not really correct.
Ok, perfecto. Nos dice que podría hablar un español falso de Spanish Cash, pero que mejor vamos a hablar entonces en inglés. Bueno, thanks a lot for being here. First of all, Giacomo was really open to do this. We have a couple weeks trying to make this happen, and he was really cool and open to make it happen. So thanks a lot, my friend. And I want to start asking for your first time hearing about Bitcoin, that first moment when you hear about Bitcoin, but then the aha moment, the revelation moment, the moment that you say, maybe I should focus more energy in this. And well, that is.
So it was interesting because it was 2000. It was basically the end of 2012, and I didn't hear about Bitcoin from a single source, but from three different sources in the span of a couple of weeks. So back then I was working as a technology consultant in Accenture, working about payments. So that was my job, all about payments and payment technologies and stuff. And then at the same time, I was participating in two different kinds of political groups and advocacy. But these two groups were completely unrelated, completely disconnected. One was the typical Austrian economic group, so and the Fed, gold standard, economic stuff. And the other one was like privacy on the internet, Tor, black markets on the internet, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. And the people I was hanging out with in these two groups was completely not overlapping. Like the first guys, they were very, in a way, conservatives, mostly focused on economics. They didn't give any importance to privacy or black markets. They were just about monetary policy. And the second guys, they were mostly socially very progressive, a little bit more punks or hippies, and they were mostly about social issues. And so in the span of 2 weeks in 2012, I think it was November, I started to get a colleague asking me, "Have you seen this blockchain stuff?" And I don't know if he used the term blockchain yet, but maybe yes. This payment stuff with Bitcoin. And then another guy from the Austrian economic groups discussed it in the chat room about the new digital gold. And then another guy said that there is new currency to pay for VPNs and privacy and burner SIM cards, and WikiLeaks may accept it and stuff like that. And it was Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was coming into my life from the three different stuff that I was doing. And so I remembered the haha moment was not really just about Bitcoin itself, but about the relationship between Bitcoin and my life. It was surprisingly at the interconnection of all my interests. So the graph there, like the Venn diagram, where you do like passion, what you're like, what you're good to do, what the world needs, and the ikigai meme with the Japanese word at the center. Well, that was basically me with Bitcoin. It's like Bitcoin is coming in from everywhere, so I may just as well focus. And so in 2013, in May, I talked with my wife, and then we decide I resign. I give up my 9 to 5 contract, lifelong contract in a multinational, and I just say I will do Bitcoin startups, and that's another story.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I was turned off my mic. Really cool to hear this because I have like a diagram of your answer, and it seems really uncommon, a really weird way to find Bitcoin and to find a kind of sense in this stuff, since many people knows because of the price or maybe because of the black markets, but more in an illegal approach to maybe those are the bad guys using this. And it is really interesting to listen this. Let me translate a little this.
Sure.
Preguntábamos entonces por los inicios y el momento en el que le hace clic Bitcoin a Giacomo Zucco, y nos dice que había escuchado de Bitcoin por allí en 2013, pero que no, y es lo particular, lo que yo le comentaba, que es bastante como paradigmático haber escuchado de Bitcoin de tantas fuentes aparentemente disímiles, pero conectadas por, bueno, estas preocupaciones que iremos viendo ahora. En primer lugar, estaba en ese momento trabajando en Accenture, en pagos. Entonces, obviamente, en 2013, cuando la red era todavía ingente, las comisiones muy baratas, obviamente el primer interés directo era pagos muy baratos. Entonces, por allí ya había un primer grupo de pensamiento alineado con la narrativa de los pagos. Sin embargo, ya como ha participado en grupos de discusión, grupos políticos, grupos hasta cierto punto de militancia, acá en Venezuela la palabra militancia está como un poco oscurecida por el chavismo, pero igual militancia en este tipo de grupos, sobre todo de economistas austriacos y también grupos de activistas de la privacidad. Entonces, en ambos grupos también se llegó a hacer la discusión y la distinción sobre lo que ofrecía Bitcoin. Para los austriacos, una especie de oro digital. Obviamente, para los que hayan leído o hayan escuchado alguna vez de la obra de Saifedean Ammous, el patrón de Bitcoin explica bastante bien esta perspectiva del dinero y cómo Bitcoin tiene sentido para la Escuela de Economía Austriaca. En el caso de los grupos de activistas de la privacidad, cómo este tipo de dinero permite el intercambio de valor sin comprometer tu identidad fiat. O sea, no arriesgas tu nombre, la dirección de tu casa y el bienestar de tu grupo familiar por comprar X producto en la dark web, sino que tu identidad es un conjunto, un hash determinado dentro de una red seudónima. Entonces allí, en esos tres tipos de discusiones diferentes, consigue una conexión neurálgica que, bueno, viene a ser Bitcoin. Su momento es darse cuenta de que está ese ikigai, ese coincidir de las cosas entre lo que te apasiona, lo que eres bueno haciendo y lo que es útil para el mundo. Entonces, en ese punto en donde Bitcoin hace coincidir estos tres marcos de referencia, y termina ya como decidiendo junto a su esposa Mir, a quien también tuvimos acá la oportunidad de tener en el canal de Satoshi en Venezuela. Le mandamos saludo a Mir. Y decide, bueno, vamos a echarlo todo hacia Bitcoin. Bueno, crear una startup en ese momento, blockchain. En ese momento, in that moment, your startup was about blockchain or was focused on Bitcoin?
At the beginning, I started about Bitcoin, even if in 2013 I was quite a shitcoiner. So my approach to Bitcoin was skeptical for the first weeks. Then I was like struck by Bitcoin, like, okay, this is actually working. And so my skepticism was my capacity to be skeptical was so damaged by the revelation of Bitcoin that for a while I was not skeptical about anything at all. So I was like, okay, this Ripple project, it makes sense. Everything made sense to me. So I was very open to cryptocurrencies in 2013. But after a while, I started to study, and I found out, and maybe we will discuss it. We already discussed the maximalist thing, but I think that there are strong economical and technical reasons why multi-coinism doesn't really make any sense. So I started to stop being interested about shitcoins in 2013. But at the beginning, I was very open-minded. But my startups were mostly about Bitcoin, Bitcoin only, I think. Even if I was a shitcoiner, the companies were Bitcoin only. The first one, I basically was one of the first employees of Green Address, what is now Green Blockchain Green Wallet. The second one was a mining farm in Switzerland, a very, very amateurish mining farm. The other one was this was very bullshit. Yeah, this was a company about tracking wine with the blockchain. So this was really bad. The company did well. It was acquired by another tracking company. But before the acquisition, I told the CEO, guys, this blockchain stuff doesn't make any sense. Let's focus on a good application to track wine provenance with NFC chips. But let's stay at that with eliminating the blockchain part completely. So there were these three things and a few others. One was about gaming, gamification of donation. It was called Starter Coin. So yeah, I did a lot of bullshit in 2013 and 2014, and some of this stuff went well. Like the tracking company was acquired by Certilogo, which is very big, and Green was acquired by Blockstream, and many stuff just was okay. My mining farm in Switzerland failed terribly, and Starter Coin was like kind of an ICO. It was very stupid in retrospect, but I tried and it failed. And in 2015, I did create a research center. So what I realized is that I was spending my time basically earning money with consultancy to banks, mostly in Italy back then. And so banks were giving me money as a consultant to explain Bitcoin to them. And then I was using this money mostly to help startups and open source development that didn't have any kind of revenue model, that were just like at loss. So I was helping Green Address with money, but without any kind of return. I was helping the other startup, but it was completely at loss. So in 2015, I said, wait, I am taking money for consultancy and I'm using money for Bitcoin developers, basically. And in return, Bitcoin developers are teaching me and giving me interesting information that I then use for consultancy. So I said, this is a business model. Let's create a company around this. So I created a research center, and the model was banks and insurance companies and stuff like that, and even energy company. They gave me money. I used this money to pay office space, home space, travels, and food for the best developers. And my pitch was, you are a Bitcoin developer, you come here, you stay in Milan for free, I pay for your food and travel, and you just work on your stuff. I give you some assistance to help you in any need, like software assistance or logistical assistance. In return, you just disclose all your information. We will take this information, package it, structure it, and sell it to banks. So this business model was fine. I did it with my wife and a few other friends. We arrived to have 11 employees over the time. It was called BHB Network Blockchain Lab. So you asked me about the name, about the blockchain. I created this as Bitcoin Lab, but the guy that wanted, the lawyer that had to incorporate the company, he said, "Guy, don't put a Bitcoin inside this because this is very like controversial. So people will probably not, the banks will probably not open your account. You will receive some taxman controls. So please stay more neutral." So he proposed the FinTech Lab, and I was Bitcoin Lab. And then we decided, let's do Blockchain Lab. So for a while, I used the blockchain hype as a marketing tool. But then in 2018, we closed down the company because the clients were mostly Switzerland right now, and the center in Milan didn't make any sense, and I had a daughter, so we had to close it down.
Okay, perfect. Let me translate a little this. Le preguntábamos sobre esa experiencia, a ver si en ese principio había estado directamente relacionado con blockchain o con shitcoins. Él dice que era mucho más, entre comillas, mente abierta a otros proyectos en ese primer momento, pero que igual sus empresas o sus emprendimientos estaban completamente relacionados con Bitcoin, que inclusive en el momento de crear BHB Network, hay ahí como un cambio de nombre, a pesar de que la idea era colocar Bitcoin en el nombre, por cuestiones legales, por cuestiones de acelerar eh, la aprobación de los permisos y también evitar tener un trato especial con respecto a los impuestos, deciden cambiarlo y utilizar el hype de blockchain a favor de la empresa y el nombre. También nos comentaba que en un principio llegó a trabajar en Green Address, que actualmente es un monedero que fue adquirido por Blockstream, pero en un principio era un equipo del que formaba parte Giacomo. También llegó a tener una operación de minería en Suiza, la que le fue bastante mal en su actividad, y quizás el máximo acto de shitcoinismo en este caso sería la empresa de tracking de vino utilizando la blockchain, que creo que por allí con el hype de 2017 se escuchó bastante esta idea de utilizar la blockchain para seguir mercancías y bueno, en este caso el proyecto era para seguir vino. Sin embargo, tuvo éxito la salida de la empresa, la venta de la empresa, así que el hype fue útil también en ese caso. Pero entonces vemos que no necesariamente para uno interesarse en Bitcoin lo hace de un solo golpe. Creo que ese es como uno de los grandes errores que tiene la gente, tiende la gente a cometer con respecto a esta postura del maximalismo, que bueno, es lo que vamos a conversar justamente ahora, porque este recorrido no es el de alguien que tiene la mente cerrada ni que simplemente no le interesa la tecnología, porque otra de las cosas que nos comentaba sobre la empresa VH Network es que la consultoría que ellos brindaban a empresas, bancos y otro tipo de perfil dependía de la relación con desarrolladores de Bitcoin que brindaban una información de muy alto conocimiento, conocimiento técnico y utilidad para estas consultorías. Entonces allí crean un modelo de negocio que va centrándose mucho más profundamente en Bitcoin y el conocimiento que se puede crear alrededor. Entonces, para llegar allí uno, y bueno, ya como mismo lo ha comentado, va haciendo un recorrido por distintas cosas. Entonces ahora vamos a hablar un poco de por qué abrazar, por qué definirse y tomar para sí esta etiqueta del maximalismo, que además particularmente a mí no me gusta identificarme así porque quien utiliza esa etiqueta lo hace para desprestigiar directamente el argumento que tú puedas estar presentando. Entonces, de ahí te llaman fundamentalista, de allí te llaman mente cerrada, entonces allí ver un poco cuál es la opinión de Giacomo con respecto a, bueno, tomar para sí la etiqueta. Well, and then you I think that you walk a path of knowledge and a path of research that drove you to embrace the label maximalist, toxic maximalist, and this other baremos of the maximalism specter. But I want to know, when did you decide to embrace it? Since it was stated by a known anti-Bitcoiner, anti-maximalism intellectual. So when did you decide to embrace it? And if this is in some way related to your own political views, like the idea to fight the social justice warriors, and then the maximalism label could be a tool to fight this kind of people in Bitcoin and in crypto. So let's talk a little about this.
Well, audio is see that something, tell me that I will try to reboot or something. So do you hear me correctly?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me good?
Yes.
Yeah, now yes.
Yes.
Do you hear me correctly? Because a little bit. Okay. Okay, so the question is basically in two parts. The first one is how I came to embrace this maximalist ideas. I came to embrace the label of maximalist, which are different things basically. About the ideas, I told you that back in 2013 I was very, very open. My mind was too close before Bitcoin, but a little too open. And when your mind is too open, the risk is your brain will just fall out of it. So you have to have some kind of skepticism, some kind of realism in order to understand stuff. So in 2013, I was basically following any kind of shitcoin and even thinking about creating shitcoins. And then I started to meet developers, and they mostly told me that they explained me the complexity of something like a cryptographic system, a system of incentives, game theoretical incentives, and a system of cryptographic primitives. So especially Lawrence Naum, the creator of Green Address, Blockchain Green, he taught me a lot about the complexity of this stuff. He said, look, it's easy to pretend you create something like Bitcoin, but this is the level of complexity you have to go. And he showed me inside the Litecoin code, Ripple code, NXT code. He showed me all the trivial mistakes, the obvious attack surfaces, the things that were just amateurish and just not good enough to create something resilient. So the first approach was technical. There was a great paper by Andrew Postra that you can still find. I think it's called Treatise on Altcoins. I think that's the title, but maybe later on you can look for the PDF and link it. It's very, very good. It's very, very early. I think it was written exactly in 2013, and he was basically pointing out creating a new entire system is not trivial. And the reason we have Bitcoin is that Satoshi took a lot of best practices. So he took like even like in the cryptographic signature he didn't create it out of nothing. He just took OpenSSL, which was not even that good because he had some bugs, but he took what was existent and he just assembled it, and he took a hash cache mechanism that was already experimented since years, and he took some experience from B-Money, B-Gold, and stuff like that, reusable proof of work. So Satoshi built on top of existing best practices without reinventing the wheel, because when you reinvent the wheel, you basically end up messing things up. So I learned this lesson, which is a lesson of basically technical humility, and I started to be very skeptical about shitcoins because of this question. Later on, thinking about the economic implication of Bitcoin, it occurred to me that it was not just a difficulty of recreating technical stack in a good way, but it was also a matter of fundamental economics about scarcity, especially. So Bitcoin is digital scarcity, but it is digital scarcity only because you assume that you cannot reproduce infinite variants of Bitcoin trading at a price with Bitcoin. So to synthesize this position in a very easy sentence, there are only just about 21 millions of Bitcoin, but there are potentially infinite altcoins. So the thing that made Bitcoin work economically and that I think bootstrapped a price that I think will be sustainable in the long run was exclusively that there is scarcity. And why the scarcity of Bitcoin is rigidly predetermined. The supply rate of Bitcoin is encoded in the algorithm. The supply rate of cryptos is completely arbitrary. So I started to understand that when you try to create altcoins, you are basically diluting the scarcity of the asset. You are creating substitute goods for Bitcoin, and this is making the total supply of cryptocurrencies unpredictable and unauditable, which is basically like a little bit like fiat money without the bad part of the guys coming to shoot you if you use another system. So the cryptocurrencies are a free market, and I like that. I think that everybody should be free to create whatever cryptocurrency they want, but I think that economically it doesn't make sense to imagine a future where people will just use hundreds or even just tens of different cryptocurrencies. I think that there is one Schelling point in game theory. When you have a point of salience, a point of coordination, in a natural coordination, you call it Schelling point. Bitcoin is the Schelling point. You can replicate the code, you can replicate the marketing, you can replicate whatever you want. You cannot replicate the fact that it was the first. It's like Christopher Columbus was the first guy, maybe after Vikings or whatever, to rediscover the Americas. You cannot replicate that. That primogeneity is scarcity. You cannot replicate being the first. You can replicate everything else. So you either have Bitcoin as a Schelling point and cryptocurrencies as a background noise, or you would have just an unpredictable inflation of possible cryptocurrencies. So I became very, very skeptical, not just of the technological feasibility of an altcoin, but even of the economical sustainability of altcoins. Then there is a connection. Like, since this doesn't make any sense economically, this will tend to attract people that are just not good enough to contribute to the real stuff. So when you're not good enough to contribute to Bitcoin, you will just leave for your own pet projects. And this creates like a adversarial selection mechanism. It's like if there is Linux or anyway Unix systems, people will not good enough to contribute to Linux. They will have to move to a pet projects, and this will continue to increase the quality of Linux and to decrease the quality of the other stuff. And then the ICO bubble happened, and all my skepticism transformed into observing an absolutely unlimited amount of bullshit that people, I mean, there was no cap, not only in the amount of cryptocurrencies created, but even in the aggressivity of bullshit used to market it. So in 2013, we were already calling scam coin every altcoin that was not, for example, I don't know, if there was some insta mining, some pre-mining, we were just like, that's a scam, that's a scam. But then that was legitimized, and people started to do ICOs, and they started to do like bailout on the ICOs, like DAO fork. So everything, so being tolerant, being tolerant with economical and technical ambiguity or hand waving or obscurity, basically brought to a proliferation of any kind of intellectual dishonesty. And so getting back to your original question, now Vitalik, that in my opinion was a very good journalist, a little bit like Aaron von Wirdum, is a very good technical journalist, but he decided to move from journalist to basically creator of scams, like the quantum computing scam, the Ethereum scam, and so on. And he decided to use maximalist as a pejorative to indicate people skeptical about what he was doing. So the question was, do I embrace the slur, do I embrace the label that is used to mock me, or do I just reject it? So do I explain, no, you're wrong, I'm not a maximalist, I'm just think that, or you just say, okay, I'm a maximalist, everybody is a maximalist. So, I mean, that's a strategical choice. I'm not 100% sure that it was the right thing to do, to embrace the label, but I thought it was a time-saving instrument, because you filter out people that are wasting your time. So my idea back then was, okay, at this point, at the peak of 2016, 2017 ICO bubble, people that cannot understand that this stuff is mostly money grabs, that there is no serious technological effort, no serious economical analysis. If you cannot see that, then probably my time to convince you is wasted. So instead of trying to reach more people by saying, no, I'm not a maximalist, I'm nice, My idea was I will not try to reach everybody. I would just use this label. So if you already get it, we may discuss. But if you are triggered by the word maximalist, probably you're not ready, and I don't have the time to convince you. So it was the embracing the label was a way to filter out people that would have wasted my time too much. I understand that some people that I respect, they don't like to be called maximalist. I completely understand that, because if your goal is different, if your goal is to reach more people, then you should explain, coming from their point of view, why it's not really a bad thing to focus on Bitcoin only and stuff like that. If you don't have the time and there is a lot of possible noise coming in, you need something like in your email, you have a spam filter, right? You are a nice person, but you cannot answer to any email coming from Nigerian princess, because Nigerian people, they are fine. And princess, I mean, I love princess, but if you answer to every Nigerian princess, you will just run out of time. So you just, when a Nigerian princess will write you, you will just say spam. And for me, maximalism was and is a way to put in a spam folder whoever I think is shilling a Ponzi scheme to me.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot for this clarification. I think that I embrace the maximalist term only when I'm talking with Bitcoiners, but there are many people in Venezuela that are not Bitcoiners, as we can just accept the label because it is a way to invalidate the points that one can make, even in the economical sense of the arguments. And I don't know, I don't have the time to explain myself, but I do prefer to don't use the term to explain myself. But I gotcha. Let me translate a little of this. Nos preguntan inclusive que cómo voy a traducir todo eso. Recuerden que son las ideas principales de la respuesta que nos da ya, como yo aquí voy anotando, así que no se preocupen. Ok, la tercera pregunta de hoy era sobre por qué decidir tomar para sí la etiqueta del maximalismo, que como hemos dicho, muchas veces se utiliza para tratar de invalidar la opinión de alguien que se centra en la investigación en Bitcoin. En este caso nos dice y nos recordaba que ya en 2013 había estado en contacto con mucha gente de alto nivel técnico sobre Bitcoin que ayudó a aterrizar su propio pensamiento, porque su interés en un principio era inclusive crear algún tipo de criptomoneda, pero a pesar de que Bitcoin es efectivamente replicable a nivel de protocolo, tú puedes forkear el protocolo y crear Bitcoin, Javier, pudiésemos hacerlo aquí un día para disfrutar de forkear Bitcoin. Lo imposible de imitar, de replicar para una copia de ese nivel de Bitcoin es los efectos de red. La idea de que Bitcoin es el selling point de este mercado, este ecosistema, este espacio que se creó alrededor. Entonces, cuando él entiende eso, ya en 2013, se va dando cuenta de que no es tan interesante fijarse en esos otros proyectos, porque inclusive el propio proceso de creación de Bitcoin, que también lo explicaba Giacomo, en donde se combinan piezas como de B-Money, de Weidai, o B-Gold, ese es de Nick Szabo, o incluso la prueba de trabajo reutilizable, que es un aporte de Halfini, el propio concepto de prueba de trabajo, que lo terminó perfeccionando Adam Back, a pesar de que se conocía previamente. Todas estas piezas forman parte del, digamos, acervo cultural previo de los cypherpunks y que Satoshi toma y perfecciona. Pero estas piezas que funcionan perfectamente para crear Bitcoin esa solución, a pesar de que tú puedes crear el funcionamiento, puedes replicar el funcionamiento, no puedes replicar la idea de que haya sido Satoshi el que utilizando esa lógica, organizando esas piezas de X forma, haya concretado esta solución única y que además le da unas cualidades sí, irreplicables. Es que no hay un adjetivo que uno pudiese añadir allí. Le da cualidades irreplicables como la escasez digital. Sí, tú puedes hacer una criptomoneda que tenga un límite de 2 millones de la emisión, pero el efecto de red que ha alcanzado Bitcoin y la importancia que tiene su escasez digital y la comprobabilidad de esa escasez digital hace que sea muchísimo más complejo, casi imposible, que un proyecto nacido dentro de su propio ecosistema pudiese entonces arrebatarle ese shelling point, que es un concepto bastante importante a la hora de entender la teoría de juegos alrededor de Bitcoin. Bueno, que principalmente consiste en que el pionero de determinado movimiento probablemente va siempre a mantener una ventaja con respecto a los que puedan venir luego, y es muy difícil arrebatar ese punto de inflexión, ese punto de atención en el mercado. Un poco una idea de Andreas Antonopoulos para explicar esto es también la distribución de Pareto. Sí, puede haber una gran cola de infinitos activos y criptomonedas, pueden haber 7.000, 8.000, 10.000, pero la que va a estar a la cabeza, si es económicamente hablando, muy probablemente sea Bitcoin. Puedes replicar las cualidades, puedes hacer lo que quieras, pero el efecto de red es irreplicable. Entonces, es a partir de allí, en 2013, con la claridad de estos conceptos, en donde ya como no se autoidentificaba como un maximalista porque quizás no existía la palabra, pero tenían la facilidad en ese momento de que cualquier moneda que viniese con características como ser instaminado, ser preminado, tener ahí esas posibilidades de alterar el protocolo en beneficio de X grupo político, como pasaría luego con el hack de la DAO. Entonces, cualquier tipo de ese proyecto en 2013 era fácilmente descartado y no había polémica con hablar de shitcoins o hablar incluso de scamcoins, pero hay como una especie de apertura, y en este punto es en donde muchas veces se utiliza el argumento de los mentes cerradas, que son los maximalistas. En realidad es una apertura que permite que hayan cosas como OneCoin, que hayan cosas como el Petro, porque la apertura supuestamente de los marcos referenciales que tú hagas del dinero después de Bitcoin permiten que tú tengas nuevas formas de estafar. Dices, vamos a crear una criptomoneda respaldada en petróleo y que va a ser redimible por un barril de petróleo, y es puro bluff, 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 utilizando las referencias y los marcos conceptuales de Bitcoin. Y eso es desleal, eso es no ser sincero a nivel intelectual, y es un poco la crítica que se sigue haciendo con respecto a esta posición del maximalismo. Entonces, inclusive nos señala que nos volvemos tolerantes con la ambigüedad y la oscuridad tecnológica y económica. O sea, no importan las características económicas y lo que hace único como dinero, como potencial activo dinero a Bitcoin, sino la posibilidad de crear otra cosa más útil, de hacer algo más, algo que añade no sé qué, que no se explica del todo cómo tecnológicamente resuelve lo que sea que se supone que resuelve, pero bueno. Y ahí inclusive nos hacía un matiz de la idea de que Vitalik pasa de ser un reportero técnico a convertirse entonces en el creador de Ethereum, que quizás buscando un poco salirse también de esa, no sé, como ganar más relevancia, no sé, pero allí ese matiz me parece también interesante de lo que nos decía Giacomo. Y finalmente, que la idea de tomar para sí el concepto de maximalismo, ya después de haberlo explicado, que es maximalismo por las cualidades monetarias únicas y la idea de que una tecnología de este tipo va a seguir siendo Chelling Point, Es también un poco filtrar el ruido que puede haber alrededor de las criptomonedas, especialmente por lo menos en 2017 con el gran boom que hubo alrededor de las ICOs. Entonces allí obviamente la persona que está convencida de que su ICO cura el cáncer no va a querer que uno le diga que realmente no hay forma de curar el cáncer con blockchain. Y va a estar convencida, entonces voy a perder mi tiempo hablando con esta persona, soy maximalista y ya como que es una forma de aplicar un filtro. Allí, bueno, creo que en líneas generales esta fue la mejor traducción que podemos hacer en lo que nos decía Giacomo. Okay, and after all this explanation and the different things that are around the maximalist term, which is the definition of Bitcoin maximalist that you can have to us?
So at the beginning, it was just about the skepticism that another cryptocurrency can work at scale in the long term. So Bitcoin is going to work, the other stuff will not going to work. Then it became basically also something else. In the scaling wars, so in the fork wars with Bcash and stuff like that, maximalists as a label was also used to indicate everybody who was conservative about Bitcoin protocol. We should not rush. We should not rush to change it. We should not increase the block time, the block size. We should be very conservative, very cautious, very adversarial, very paranoid about Bitcoin. So any change, Bitcoin is not a startup. It's not like move fast and break things. Bitcoin should move slow and not break things, because that's the point. This is connected. This was a different meaning of maximalist. This was often used by Roger Ver and other people, but it's connected with the first one, because if you think that the Schelling point of Bitcoin is unreplicatable, then you don't want to break it, because you know that it's unreplicatable. So if you think that there can be several working at scale altcoins, so you're okay with changing Bitcoin, because if you break it, if you fail, you will just move to another one. But if you think that the Schelling point is important, then you will also become way much more conservative, because first of all, if you break it, you're in trouble, because there is not another one. You cannot replicate it. Second point, if the first kind of maximalism is true, then there is no competition by altcoins, because altcoins, even if they put some fancy new technology, they cannot win, because they cannot replicate the Schelling point. So there is not really, I mean, it's fine to adopt any improvement. If there is an improvement, let's adopt it. But there is no rush, no emergency. So the screams about we have to change Bitcoin because otherwise altcoins will take over. My point was, so what? If they can take over, let them take over, and we will just use altcoins. If they can't take over, like I think they can't, so let's not rush Bitcoin for this kind of competition, which is impossible in the first definition. So the first was only Bitcoin. The second was, of course, only Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency. I'm not saying that anything which is not Bitcoin in the world is wrong, but as a cryptocurrency, only Bitcoin. Then do not rush to change Bitcoin. Then another argument starting to pile on, which was a little bit unrelated, which is basically the argument about spending Bitcoin. There was this rhetoric, this kind of a little bit Keynesian rhetoric, which saving is bad. Saving is, if you use Bitcoin to save your wealth, or save the wealth of your family, or protect the wealth of your family when you cross a border or whatever, that's not really using, because you are just saving. The real use is only when you spend. But that's a problem, because realistically, if you have a better kind of money, people will try to get rid of the worst kind of money first when they spend. In Venezuela, if you have the Bolivar and you have maybe the gray market US dollars, people will tend to accept US dollar, better, especially in the gray market, in the black market. They will accept US dollar rather than bolivars, and they will try to spend bolivars if they have some bolivar before, because it could be just deflated very, 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 very soon. So if we think that the fiat money, especially fiat money in countries like Venezuela, but even the privileged fiat money like euro and dollars, they right now they're kind of stable, but over the long term they will just destroy your wealth, because they will lose 90% of the purchasing power in a few decades, even if they remain stable, let alone if they collapse. So if that is true, you don't want to spend. Saving becomes a very important use case of Bitcoin, and we should not push people to spend. You really have to spend Bitcoin, otherwise you're not using it. Saving is using. Of course, also spending is okay. I use Bitcoin for spending when I need it. For example, if I need to buy a VPN over the internet, I don't want to use credit cards. People may use it for recreational drugs, or if you want to buy a Bible in the Emirates or whatever. You can use every time that your purchase is forbidden and your purchase is online. Then you will profit from using Bitcoin. If it's offline, like in a street, probably you will be better off for a few years more. You will be better off using USD cash, because if you are in person, you don't really need Bitcoin. I mean, you can use it, but you don't really need it. But online, your only option, if you want privacy, if you have to break the rules, then your only option is Bitcoin. So the third point of maximalism was do not push people, stop these rhetorics about spending. And the fourth point started to be about style of discussion, about being nice and being inclusive, or being open-minded over being more strict and more zero bullshit approach. And I think that people started to identify maximalists with people that were mostly no bullshit. It's like, what if I create a new token for... No, this is bullshit. Not in order to be mean with people, but as I said before, in order to create a filter where you don't allow people to take advantage of people's time, and open-mindedness. When we are honest with each other, when there are not adversaries, open-mindedness is great. Even if we disagree, we can talk and discover the disagreements and discover agreements, and we can evolve. But in an adversarial context, where people will try to take advantage of your open-mindedness in any way to take your money, or to take your time, or to take both, then some level of anti-spam filter is needed. So, and also another argument for not being nice is that I think that Bitcoin is very connected with the ideas of crypto anarchy and agorism and cypherpunk ideas. So we are basically getting rid of regulators and legal gatekeepers. But there is a problem. If we get rid of regulators, we cannot assume that frauds and scams and cons will be taken care from the police. We don't want that. I don't want shitcoiners I don't want one-coin promoters to be arrested. Since I don't want the state involved anyhow, I have to take care more about an internal, peaceful market reaction to scams. So the point is that it's not that because I think that... So some people will say, if you are pro-free market, then you cannot criticize one coin. I say the opposite. Since I'm pro-free market, since I don't want anybody stopping anybody from buying or selling anything, I want them to be free, then it's even more important for me and for others to be very critical and very vocal about something which doesn't work, some scam, some fraud. The more freedom I want, the more criticism we have to be able to do ourselves, like internal peaceful policing from the point of view of intellectual clarity, of explanation, of calling out stuff. The more we do that, the less we need the state involved. Because if everybody gets scammed, then you will have regulators stepping in even more, and we don't want that. We want the free market, and criticism are part of the free market. And the very last point that you mentioned in the question before that I didn't address, it was not really included in my classical definition of maximalism, but it's starting to become very important in the last years, I think, which is the social justice warrior, politically correct fashion, mostly in the USA. So most of the people, this is not really a maximalist thing. This is more like a cultural thing. I think it's more general. People who live outside the US, they really cannot understand the obsession on sex and gender and race that are right now taking over the political debate in the US. So I mean, I see somebody. The last thing that I care about somebody I'm interacting with is how much melanin is in their skin. I literally cannot. I mean, the only case in which I care about melanin in your skin is if we are going to the beach and we have to select the sunscreen. Then probably I will notice if you have more melanin than me or less, because we have to distribute sunscreen. But except for that very specific situation, I think it's so stupid to even consider that when we interact with people. But in America, there are people that are seriously, honestly, so brainwashed and so out of touch with reality that they think that if there is a term like a blacklist inside the Bitcoin code, then people with a darker skin complexion, they will feel excluded by Bitcoin because there is the word blacklist, which is, I mean, from outside America, this is obviously something close to mental illness. This is completely crazy. But some people in America, they really believe that they are helping people by policing unrelated words like blacklist or very stupid stuff like this. And so right now there is another cultural divide in Bitcoin, which just a few days ago I was inadvertently protagonist of, is actually this clash between what I would call the sane people that don't want even to debate the word blacklist because it's stupid even to conceive the debate, and people mostly in America, which are mostly so-called white, rich Americans in their university campus or in their New York apartment. They really think that this is important, and most of their person on the rest of the world, they don't agree. So this is not really connected with maximalism, but there is some kind of cultural clash about this as well. So it's right that you specified it.
Okay, perfect. Because I think that the next question will be connected with that, but that part of the question was connected with this present, because even when we are outside the US, their discussions affects the discussions on Bitcoin Twitter and on Reddit, on everything when we can read about Bitcoin. So I think that we will talk a little about that, but let me translate a little about this. Le preguntamos entonces una definición sobre el maximalismo. Vamos a preguntar también sobre toda esa pregunta que acaban de mencionar, la vamos a añadir a las preguntas, pero vamos a continuar acá un poco más. Maximalismo como escepticismo. Es como el primer elemento que tiene la definición de este concepto. También un poco la actitud conservadora que tomó un grupo significativo de usuarios y también de líderes vocales de Bitcoin, en cierto modo en redes sociales, con respecto a la guerra de la escalabilidad, de donde terminó naciendo el fork de Bcash. Entonces allí también hubo un segundo momento interesante para este maximalismo. De esa idea que habíamos señalado antes sobre el shelling point, que es Bitcoin dentro de su mercado, se deriva entonces un tercer elemento para este concepto, porque si uno entiende la importancia que tiene que Bitcoin sea el shelling point de las criptomonedas, probablemente uno entenderá de mejor manera la necesidad de que el protocolo se mantenga funcionando, que siga funcionando a pesar de los intereses políticos que nosotros podamos tener, porque mucho del debate de la escalabilidad estuvo influido por el interés político de mineros. Habrá quien diga que era el interés legítimo sobre el beneficio de la red, pero cuando se mezclan los intereses políticos, entonces uno allí deja de tener tan claro si el shelling point es lo importante o si es mi bolsillo lo más significativo. Entonces, obviamente, ese tercer elemento de poner en su justo peso lo que significa que Bitcoin sea el shelling point, no cambiar el protocolo de la nada, no arruinar las cosas por querer evolucionar, por querer añadir nuevos elementos, porque en este caso no es que las altcoins no puedan tratar de replicar y tratar de añadir mejoras al funcionamiento de Bitcoin. Es que nuevamente no pueden replicar el haber sido el originario, el pionero de ese movimiento a partir del que se crean nueva playa de opciones más ecológicas, más rápidas, más privadas, más etcétera. Otro elemento en donde también tiene que ver el maximalismo es una narrativa hasta cierto punto keynesiana, como la calificaba Giacomo, con respecto al gasto de Bitcoin, con respecto a la idea de que tener Bitcoins ahorrados, y los venezolanos que nos estén viendo seguramente entenderán la importancia del ahorro. Si el gobierno te arrebata la opción de ahorro, tú no tienes forma de tener perspectiva al futuro. No puedes ni siquiera plantearte más allá de tu fecha de pago porque no tienes recursos materiales para participar en el intercambio de bienes y servicios. Entonces, obviamente, la narrativa de que ahorrar el hodl no es utilizar Bitcoin, sino gastar es la única forma de usar Bitcoins, también ha sido un punto en el que el maximalismo se ha visto involucrado, porque hay que desmentir esa idea de que ahorrar, de que tener dinero con perspectiva a futuro no es utilizar igualmente ese dinero, y quizás desacralizar la idea de que solo gastando estás utilizando el dinero. Es ahí otro de los elementos en donde se hace significativo. Y bueno, claro, el maximalismo como esta actitud de no ser tolerante. Y este no ser tolerante, principalmente no ser tolerante con la mentira, con la gente que se comporta de manera hipócrita para conseguir sus fines, y se basa sobre todo en la idea de que Bitcoin es dinero para enemigos. Querámoslo no, o nosotros seamos amigos entre nosotros, tengamos valores comunes. Lo que hace grande a Bitcoin es que lo puedo utilizar yo y lo puedo utilizar mi peor enemigo de muerte sin que nosotros podamos intervenir en esa usabilidad. Y en ese sentido, si entendemos Bitcoin como dinero para enemigos, probablemente quien pueda sacar rédito de tener mejor información con respecto a mí va a hacerlo, y tener la mente muy abierta baja la guardia que podemos nosotros tener con respecto a esa posibilidad de que gente se aproveche de nosotros. Entonces, recordar que Bitcoin combina las ideas del criptoanarquismo, las ideas de los cypherpunks, incluso un poco el agorismo, la reducción del Estado, la posibilidad de que los ciudadanos intercambien valor directamente, y mientras más P2P se vuelva las relaciones de valor, pues mucho más necesario va a ser uno ser corrosivo, tóxico contra los estafadores, contra la gente que quiere aprovecharse de tener más o mejor información que otros. Entonces, esto no quiere decir que uno esté en contra del libre mercado. Al contrario, estás tratando que el mercado sea lo más justo, en cierto modo, que haya realmente participación legítima, que no es que vayas a comprar espejitos pensando que estás comprando diamantes, un poco pensar eso. Y bueno, finalmente, y relacionado con la realidad más actual de Bitcoin, un poco Bitcoin como el maximalismo como una respuesta a las discusiones del revisionismo cultural. Es una realidad que en Estados Unidos hay una discusión bastante activa y era lo que nos mencionaba Giacomo con respecto a la importancia del racismo, con respecto a la importancia de los temas de género, y eso incluso llega a niveles en donde intervienen el desarrollo tecnológico. Y un poco la reacción maximalista, esta idea de tratar de mantener los principios claros, es con respecto a ese revisionismo cultural. Si realmente esa discusión eminentemente política, que busca objetivos claramente políticos, realmente tiene cabida en el desarrollo de una herramienta que, si bien puede servir para la política, su desarrollo y el mantenimiento y crecimiento de su protocolo es más bien un territorio bastante apolítico en donde se habla a nivel técnico. No interesa si Giacomo es súper blanco y yo soy más moreno. Si nosotros proveemos mejoras al protocolo de Bitcoin, somos iguales frente al protocolo, o sea, como desarrolladores, etcétera. Entonces allí también pensar un poco en el maximalismo como respuesta a esta revisión cultural. Y ahora vamos a preguntar directamente la opinión de Giacomo con respecto a este tema. So, you mentioned this recent blacklist affair, and I want your thoughts, since I saw that you tweeted a little about this discussion. I want your thoughts on this, the blacklist, and how it was resolved, and even with Vladimir van der Lande, the maintainer of Bitcoin Core, saying that maybe people is doing too much noise or are taking so hard on Bitcoin Core developers. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on this.
Well, sure. This is basically all my fault. So I'm sorry, especially for people like Vlad, that they felt attacked. It was not my intent. Basically, what I did in this case was what I do basically all time on Twitter. I write what I think, and often what I think is controversial or could be controversial. I just write it, and people react. The only difference is that usually people react just a bit on what I write. In this case, this probably resonated with some deep problem, and I think there are at least two kinds of problems. I will elaborate on that a little bit. But people really reacted this time, and the reaction was huge, more than I predicted, or more than I even tried to provoke directly. So what happened is that I was reviewing. I was just checking commitments, and also with other guys in the Italian community. It happened that we saw these commitments about the word blacklist that was actually 3 months old. So what happened is that this guy with a new GitHub profile, so not a contributor, a guy that nobody know, a guy or a girl, it doesn't matter, somebody with a new username proposed to change blacklist to blocklist, because blacklist was offensive for black people. So the code region, the part of the code where this change was proposed was completely irrelevant. So first thing, this was not a big issue. This was an internal variable. The users were never exposed to this, and it was in a Python test suite, not even in code, let alone consensus code. So it was not important. And I didn't care about this variable. This variable can be called Hitler list or Stalin list or Giacomo Zucco is an idiot list. I really don't care. This will not affect the code in any way. But the process was kind of was concerning for me, because the process was this guy out of nothing, not a contributor, with a new account, only using the account to say that the blacklist is racist, And the developers, one developer in particular, saying that, yeah, some people could be offended by blacklist, so I accepted the change. And the other developers basically saying something like, we don't really care, this is not relevant, but before this starts to make any noise, we are scared to create any kind of drama, so let's approve it, so everybody's happy. And I thought that this process was very problematic. It was problematic alone because anyway, in Bitcoin Core is critical stuff. Even a small change, even in a relevant part, as a habit, as a process, as a practice, should not be merged because it's not important. If it's not important, it should be rejected, not merged. Especially if something political created by a non-contributor just to make a political point, it should be therefore rejected. Also, there was a NAC, there was a not acknowledged in the GitHub discussion, and the developer said we should merge it fast because otherwise it will create noise. And so I know why they did it. They didn't do that because they want to sneak in some politics. They did it because they were scared of exactly what happened. But I think that their reaction to accept it to avoid drama is completely wrong. You should reject it, otherwise you will have drama. Because what happened after? It happened that 3 months later, I randomly discovered this stuff. And also it was kind of ugly because you go from blacklist, which for any sane person cannot be offensive for racial things, if you are honest. I mean, I don't believe that there is a single honest human being offended by the word blacklist unless he's totally ignorant about the history of the word. So this may be bad for other reasons, but it's not racist. And then you change it with block list, which can be confusing because in the same file, there is also a reference to a list of blocks. So you are in Bitcoin where we do have a list of blocks, which is the time change. So it could be confusing. So it was a bad decision in an irrelevant part of the code, but with a very bad process. Like, since somebody is making some political fuss, then we should approve before we create any drama. So what happened is that I discovered that 3 months later. I just tweeted about that with a normal tweet. It was a provocative tweet, but it, just the same I do for everything else. I'm used to voice controversial opinion. So I said, this is worrying because this is not yet anything serious. It's not that somebody was banned from contributing because it was not political aligned. So it's nothing like that. It was just an irrelevant word, but this is a bad tendency. This is a bad trend. Especially, I was assuming a context. The context is what is happening with software project in the United States right now, where this kind of, sorry for the technical word, but this kind of bullshit political rhetoric out of nothing and on nothing is used as a tool by some people to take over projects. This happened with Linux Torvald being basically excluded because it was not into political SJW bullshit. This happened with Torvalds in MIT. This happened with Jake Applebaum with the Me Too movement inside Tor. So there are cynical people. So basically, there are people actually affected by racism or gender violence. There are people really affected by intolerance or oppression in the world. Then there are people that are well-meaning, but they are not affected. They don't even understand what actual oppression is. So they're like rich, spoiled white kids in America. Then in their campus, they think that the problem of people with ethnical struggle, the problem is actually the word blacklist. So they are well-meaning, but they are just completely out of touch with reality. And then there are some cynical people that will take this excuse in order to take over software projects. And this is not theory. This really happened, again, in Linux and so on. And in Bitcoin is even more critical. I mean, this is a possible. I'm not saying this is an obvious attack surface, but this is a possible attack surface. So what I did was just tweet about this, and a guy, a contributor to Electrum, Async, Eclair, he said, okay, I will go on GitHub and I will just ask to revert because the word block list is very ambiguous in Bitcoin. So let's go back to blacklist. Then he interacted very peacefully with the maintainer, and they decided that also blacklist was not very good, because blacklist seems like a police, is a little bit like censorship, so it's not very good as well. So they selected disabled, which is a more neutral term. So the guy was very reasonable, but then what happened is that people was concerned, like I was, about this, and they started to log into GitHub, for a lot of new people actually discussing and debating about this. And there was some kind of knee-jerk reaction by developers that were feeling like threatened or offended, because usually they do a very important work, they do a thankless, difficult work, and most of people doesn't even know how much it takes, and they have a lot to do, they don't have time to waste. But now they had to waste time because a lot of people logged into GitHub to participate to this discussion that was important for them. And what really concerned me was not the initial commitment, which was, again, mostly irrelevant, just a potential concerning sign. But the reaction to this kind of mess of people participating in the discussion, mostly in a kind way, in a polite way, somebody with more serious overtones, they started to, like one developer in particular, John Newbury, he tried to signal to GitHub to ban the contributor that made the pull request that was accepted by the maintainer. He wanted to ban him from GitHub. He signaled him from GitHub as a troll, and he started to answer. There are also people in Italy that were posting in a chat. I tried to make a comment about this, and this guy responded to me, "You're wasting everybody's time," and they basically banned my account from the repository. So this is super paradoxical. See, you want to be inclusive, you want to be welcoming so much that when somebody will come with some telling you that what they need is not changing blacklist or some bullshit like that. For example, me and you, we are not native English speakers. We know that in a code project like Bitcoin, the level of melanin in our skin is irrelevant, because when you write code, nobody is watching your skin, and even your genitals are irrelevant. But the fact that you don't know English is actually very relevant and can actually prevent you from contributing. So it is more important than anything else. And so people coming from outside the world, explaining them that they don't share this US-centric obsession over words, they were treated very unwelcomely and very toxically by some, not all developers. Other developers like Vlad, they were just scared and disoriented by this, and I'm sorry about that, because they are doing a serious job and they had to waste time. I hope that they will just know now that it's a better strategy in the future. If they want to avoid wasting time, the better strategy is to reject political PRs, not to accept them because they are not a problem. So this is, I think, the whole story here.
Okay, perfect. Let me translate a little. Le preguntábamos a Giacomo.
So if I may have a problem with the battery of the laptop. So if I collapse while you are translating, you know why it's not out of. I'm not taking any offense.
Okay, perfect. Le preguntamos entonces ya como sobre este suceso que ocurrió este fin de semana con el PR que se está añadiendo al repositorio de Bitcoin para cambiar la palabra blacklist por la palabra blocklist, porque tiene una carga simbólica racial. Y ahí entonces comienza uno ya a ver que la discusión no está sobre el protocolo realmente, sino sobre las implicaciones del discurso que se utiliza para desarrollar ese protocolo y dando por sentado que la discusión técnica obedece a los mismos intereses de la discusión política, como si el lenguaje estuviese todo cargado de la misma manera en todos los ámbitos de la práctica humana. Entonces, nos dice que estaban revisando junto a otro grupo de bitcoiners italianos un poco los cómics y cómo había estado el desarrollo en Bitcoin, y encuentran entonces este PR que ya tenía 3 meses, que a pesar de que no es un elemento que vaya a afectar la política monetaria o el funcionamiento profundo de Bitcoin, entonces como un primer vistazo a lo que puede ser esta discusión de social justice warriors, sí, como esta tendencia al revisionismo de todas las categorías que existen porque alguien se puede ofender. Está bien que las palabras que uno utiliza te crean, pero esto es un ámbito técnico, o sea, no es lo mismo. En fin, dice que el proceso a través del que se hizo esta modificación fue bastante particular porque no hubo discusión de los elementos, o sea, como que la carga de esa política que hay detrás del concepto no se hizo explícita, pero además pareciera que los mantenedores que fueron responsables en ese momento querían evitar que hubiese controversia, querían evitar entonces esta polémica que al final sí terminó sucediendo. Vemos que, o sea, no es que necesariamente va a suceder así, pero ya ha habido ejemplos en donde esta agenda revisionista ha tomado el desarrollo de proyectos de software, como en el caso de Linux, y nos mencionaba incluso otros casos, por ejemplo, el movimiento Me Too dentro de Tor. Entonces, obviamente allí, o sea, uno no puede pensar que no es que no estén sucediendo cosas y que esas agendas de repente no tengan algún asidero en lo real. La cosa es cuando el ejercicio del racismo, por ejemplo, trata de extrapolarse inclusive a elementos en donde no tiene absolutamente nada que ver. Satoshi Nakamoto era negro, era blanco, era chino, ¿qué importa? O sea, inclusive su propio perfil como creador de esta tecnología ya da cuenta de que la discusión política de los derechos del ciudadano se pueden solventar a través del código. No necesitas saber si era japonés, si era de donde fuera, no importa. Entonces, es en este mismo sentido que se hacía esa crítica y bueno, terminó ahí un poco con algunos desarrolladores de Bitcoin Core no tan contentos con la idea de que mucha gente entonces que nunca ha participado en la discusión entonces se esté sumando a comentar el repositorio, que le hacen perder su tiempo, inclusive algunos han reaccionado directamente mal con toxicidad con respecto a las preguntas que pueden haber alrededor de este tema. Creo que hay una pregunta acá bastante interesante que no está directamente relacionada, pero la podemos retomar de una vez, que es con respecto a la tendencia de los no-coiners. Okay. We have a live comment question about this no-coiner tendency to talk about blockchain like the real revolution, but Bitcoin as a old technology and all this stuff. What are your thoughts on this? Why do you think that this happens?
So I think that blockchain was something close, very close. I'm not the first guy to notice this. It was very close to the term online in the middle of the 90s. There was a point in which the internet was very scary. And when something is scary for the incumbents, for the mass media, for the telecommunication giant, usually when something is scary, you go through the phases of elaboration of laws. So the first one is denial. So there you can find some articles about the internet is a joke in 93, 94. Then it's rage. The internet is real and is a place full of perverts and scammers and terrorists. And 3 was basically bargaining. So the internet is real, is interesting. I cannot say it's not, otherwise I will look like a dinosaur, but I cannot accept the word. So we'll create another word, which is something that I can control more to signal that I'm open to innovation, but I don't accept these. So back then it was online without internet. Internet is still bad, but my online system like MSN, AOL, and stuff like that, it's better. So blockchain is the same. It's basically, I cannot say that Bitcoin doesn't exist anymore because otherwise I look stupid, but I cannot say Bitcoin, otherwise I look like accepting. So I have to say a word that will be diffusing, will be de-escalating, will be more safe. And this word is blockchain. And many no coiners and institutions, they use blockchain. So blockchain is like saying, I don't want you to think I'm too old to understand. I don't want you to think that I'm getting out of touch. So I'm still signaling my presence in the debate, but I cannot talk about Bitcoin. It's interesting for me that blockchain is actually very symmetrical to another term, which is crypto. So it's like sometimes I was responding to accusation that maximalism is extremism. And I said, no, actually, this was a little bit of a rhetorical answer, but I said maximalism is actually moderatism, because there are two extremisms. One is the extremism of no coiners, that think that nothing can possibly happen. And the other is the extremism of shitcoiners, that think that everything can happen and there is no bound to reality and to realism and stuff like that. So I think that blockchain is a favorite word of no coiners about Bitcoin when they want to signal that they somehow participate to Bitcoin. And crypto is the symmetrical word for shitcoiners when they want to say something but they cannot say Bitcoin. And these are very symmetrical, because like blockchain is for people that think that Bitcoin is too scary, too volatile, too connected with finance, too disruptive. And crypto is actually the word for people that think that Bitcoin is too boring, too stable, not enough gains, not enough volatility. They want more. Usually these are like traders or gamblers. Like, Bitcoin is too old. I want this new technology to get rich faster. So they want more. So in blockchain, the typical guy in blockchain is a banker working in innovation of the bank, and he will arrive and he will say, I want blockchain, but I want a non-financial use of blockchain because I'm scared about money, about finance, because that's my thing. And the crypto guy will come to you and he will say, I want financial application about everything. They will try to tokenize everything. They will try to make money, to monetize everything. So the blockchain guy, they're scared. He's scared of money. They just want the technology. And the crypto guy, he wants money. He wants a lot of money. He wants to monetize everything. So they are kind of symmetrical for me.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I didn't saw this symmetrical relation, but it is really useful and I saw now. Le preguntábamos eso que nos habían comentado allí en el chat sobre por qué muchos no coiners suelen enfocarse primero en blockchain y desestimar Bitcoin. Gracias a Quique, que fue el que originalmente nos había aportado esta pregunta. Dice ya como que tiene mucho que ver con esa primera reacción, por ejemplo, con el Internet, que originalmente se rechazaba, luego se le aplicaban los prejuicios que uno tuviese disponible en ese momento y finalmente se trataba de obtener una posición más o menos congraciada con ese fenómeno. Entonces, en el primer caso sería... no estoy de acuerdo con Bitcoin, me parece que eso no va a funcionar. Luego los prejuicios Bitcoin lo utilizan solo los criminales y eso es algo que seguramente voy a estar delinquiendo, alguna cosa así. Y finalmente esta fase en donde utilizas blockchain, porque obviamente ya te das cuenta de que Bitcoin está sucediendo y que te estás quedando fuera del tren, pero quieres igual sonar cool sin estar involucrado con los elementos negativos de esa tecnología. Pero añadí entonces otro elemento bastante interesante, que es que así como los no coiners suelen abrigarse en la palabra blockchain, muchas de las personas relacionadas con las criptomonedas, con los tokens, con toda esta nueva posibilidad de crear múltiples nuevas tecnologías, etcétera, se identifican más con la palabra cripto. En ese caso sería personas que quieren crear nuevo dinero, que quieren descentralizarlo todo, crear nuevos servicios, nuevas cosas, etc. Entonces, en ese sentido hay como unos dos extremos, el del máximo miedo con respecto a Bitcoin y lo que puede significar, que sería el que utilizaría la palabra blockchain, y por el otro lado el que está en el máximo hype de monetizar y convertir todo en un token, que sería el que utilizaría la palabra cripto. Y bueno, creo que fue bastante redonda esa respuesta. I want to close with RGB, and if you can tell us about this, what is RGB, and how does it work, and what does it offers. It will be great to listen about this.
So I am scared that the battery will run out. So if that happens, I will just say hello to you in advance. But I hope it doesn't happen and it resists for the explanation. So RGB is basically this. It starts as a research program, as a research and development program into a design, which is called client-side validation. It's a design conceived by Bitcoin developer Peter Todd. The idea of client-side validation is that Bitcoin uses global consensus, meaning that every node in the network must to download everything from everybody and validate it forever. This is global consensus. And this is what doesn't scale, because if you create a lot of space to updates, then people will have a lot of problems in validating. Validating will become slow and expensive. And if you reduce the space of updates too much, then people will be, it will be easy to validate, but it will become very expensive and very slow to actually transact on the protocol. So you have this trade-off, which is very, very bad. And also you have a problem of privacy in global consensus, because if everybody is receiving any single transaction and storing it forever, then you can have stuff like chain analysis, trying to de-anonymize people, trying to spying on people, which is bad for privacy and bad for fungibility. So Peter Todd says, actually, we don't need global consensus for everything in Bitcoin. Like when I send you a Bitcoin transaction, you will do two things. The first is to validate that the transaction is good, so that the signature is true, that is coming from another UTXO, which was coming from a valid transaction, and so on and so on. So the validity of signatures and of scripts, of contracts, this is something that your node will do alone. And then there is another stuff that you have to do, which is verifying confirmations. So not only this transaction is valid, is following the rule, but it's also included in a block, in a valid block. So I know that it's not double spent. I know that it cannot be reverted, cannot be reorged. So you need two things, validity and confirmation. And Peter Todd said, the global consensus, the time chain, the blockchain, is only needed for confirmation, not for validity. So why are we putting all the signatures, all the transaction graph on the blockchain where everybody else has to validate it? Let's use the blockchain only for a commitment of what he calls single-use seals. So in the idea of Peter Todd, the miners, they don't have to care of the content of a transaction. You only pay to publish something, and then you commit in there the entire structure of the transaction graph that you will send peer-to-peer. So right now, if I send you some Bitcoin transaction, I will not have to give you some data. I will just broadcast this data somewhere, and then you will eventually download it because everybody else is downloading it and validating it. So it's everybody.
Creo que ya como ahora sí murió, recuerden que nos había dicho que probablemente su batería iba a fallecer y que les mandaba saludos a todos. RGB, que es el proyecto en donde está trabajando ya, como que va a poder resolver en cierto modo la escalabilidad de Bitcoin, se basa en esta forma de validar las transacciones y de añadir los bloques a la blockchain propuesto por el desarrollador, este es Peter Todd, que a veces me confundo con Peter Wille, pero Peter Todd, que plantea que no es necesario que toda la información vaya directamente a la blockchain. En este caso, la idea es que existe un gran consenso global en donde los nodos que corremos en nuestras casas obviamente cumplen y enforzan las reglas del juego Bitcoin, pero que no necesariamente toda esa información debe ir directamente al registro, no es necesario. Es lo que dice Peter Todd y es lo que han tomado entonces para desarrollar RGB. Entonces, la validez y el consenso no necesariamente implica que toda la información debe estar directamente en la blockchain. Y RGB, el approach, el enfoque de RGB es que la validación de esas transacciones, de esos bloques, sea realizado directamente por el usuario. No quiere por el cliente que opera en el nodo. No quiere decir que el usuario va a tener que entrar a teclear y poner sí recibir la transacción. No es esa la idea, sino que de manera automática el software propuesto, este protocolo RGB, puede entonces ayudar a que la validación sea del lado del cliente operador del nodo y sea mucho más sencillo el registro de la información en la blockchain y sea más escalable entonces la información que se añade a la blockchain. Hubiese sido interesante escuchar un poco más junto a Giacomo de este proyecto, pero bueno, vemos que estamos ya sobre la 1:30 y estuvimos, bueno, hablando el día de hoy con Giacomo Zucco sobre el maximalismo, sobre otra serie de temas. Tuvo que partir porque se le acabó la batería de la laptop, pero bueno, manda saludos y espero que haya sido útil este rato en el que estuvimos conversando sobre el maximalismo, ver ahí los matices sobre la importancia del shelling point monetario que significa Bitcoin. Bueno, quedan todos invitados el día jueves a la segunda charla introductoria del mes. Estaremos hablando de tecnología. El viernes vamos a tener un encuentro sobre minería. Y muchas gracias a todos por conectarse el día de hoy con nosotros.